I've always loved traveling. It's in my blood. I can't really settle in one place. There was this one instance when I traveled to Argentina and was hyped, rushing to get to know all of the interesting places in just one day. Campo del Cielo, Field of Heaven, was one of my top 10 destinations. Visiting and wandering around the park the first day, I met another tourist, a geologist, that had discovered his passion for the career because of the meteorites. We got along, and it turned out he was a big fan of traveling, too. He was from Europe, but because of all of the trips he had taken and all of the languages he had learned, his accent was unnoticeable. I'm afraid to say I didn't know plenty about the meteorites myself, just that they were huge space rocks and looked amazing. He laughed and told me not to worry. The first time he had heard about the meteorites, he didn't even have an idea of what meteorites were. I assumed he must have heard about them since he was a little kid. He took the time to explain and summarize me all of his knowledge about these particular meteorites, which was quite a lot. I admit, I was a little disappointed that the theory suggested it had been only one big celestial body that had broken into pieces after entering the atmosphere. It was much cooler to believe that there had been a huge meteor shower with the night sky all lighted up. Boy, did this guy know about the meteorites. He cited all of the info about the collected pieces. The largest piece extracted, its name, the Gansendo, weighs 30,800 kilograms of pure nickel iron. The average composition of each meteorite is 6.67% nickel, 0.43% carbon monoxide, 0.25 phosphorus, and some more minerals that I didn't get enough of a high grade in high school chemistry to remember. But the point was that there were at least 92.6% iron. It was like talking to a walking encyclopedia, who soon became a history book when he started telling me how the meteorites had been discovered. Apparently, they crashed around 2,200 years BC, but the first register of them was made in 1576, when the Spanish conquerors were here, and the governor of the province heard the natives had a huge storage of iron, which of course turned out to be the meteorites, but nobody knew what they were back then. The natives were furious, he said. They thought the governor wanted to take their iron away from them. He actually wanted to. I noticed how sad his voice became on the last part. It's always sad to hear that kind of stories. Something was a bit eerie and intriguing about him. I had no idea what. Maybe it was the way he narrated the stories or something else. I experienced a very strange feeling. The governor documented the expedition when the soldiers brought him samples of the iron and stored it in the registers at Seville, but the report was forgotten, he continued. 200 years later, many other expeditions continued to discover more of the meteorites. Miguel Rubin de Celis led one of them, and he didn't believe the meteorites had fell from the sky. He scoffed. He was just as skeptical as the governor. I'm so glad I at least could convince him to send the samples to the Royal Society of London. I turned. What do you mean you convinced him? He took out a watch from his wallet. What called out my attention was that this was an antique watch. With an antique design. It sort of looked like a relic, but it was so flawlessly polished and in such perfect conditions, it seemed to be worth millions. It had a golden chain holding a small accessory stone. I caught too brief of a glance to make out which kind of stone it was, but it was the same color as the Campo del Cielo meteorites. Oh, sorry, I've got to go. My new friend apologized. Where are you going? I'm heading late to an appointment, he said over his shoulder as he started walking away. Actually, I think I scheduled several appointments at the same time. Oh, that sucks. Sorry to take too much of your time then. No worries. I've got time. Didn't you just say you were late? I asked. I am late, he clarified, moving some mechanisms in his watch to modify the hour. But I've got time. All the time in the world, actually. You work around here or something? Yeah. I work part-time shifts at the museum. He was still immersed in his watch. Oh, I was about to head over to the museum itself. Would you mind? And before I could even complete my sentence, he disappeared around the corner of a street. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The typical strange feeling grew stronger. That weirded me out a whole lot, but after I washed off the shock, I continued my trip and went to visit the museums. There were exhibitions of the meteorites too, and that day they were showing pictures and portraits of the conquerors that had encountered them. I was fascinated. As I wandered around the museum, I came across the curator. He was quite impressed by my knowledge of the meteorites. Suddenly, I saw something which completely shook me. I felt as if the ground under my feet was drifting away. There was this painting of the Spanish governor directing the military to the expedition of the Iron, and the meteorites and a prominent soldier holding an antique watch looked surprisingly similar to the guy I had just spoken to. Then, there was an illustration of Francisco de Manga with his first officer, who was also the guy that I met at the park. And then, there was one of Miguel Rubin de Celis next to an officer who was also the one I met at the park. Even till today, I am unable to chalk down any possible scientific explanation of that incident. Did I actually encounter a ghost?